Hey, good morning. Greta Ross here, Mind, Body, Soul Shift. And as promised, we are going to have our table talk discussion. I want to focus on the last three pillars that we talked about here on Mind, Body, Soul Shift, which was the emotional pillar, the environmental pillar, and the spiritual pillar. And we're going to take each one of those pillars with Fayedra and Helah. I'm going to introduce them and have them say hello. Just want to let you know what the show is about today. And so that way they can kind of share some experiences, because I know that I shared information with you, but I think that when you can kind of relate it to someone's story, it kind of becomes more, you can identify with that. So that's why we have Fayedra and Helah here this morning. So if you guys could say hello to everyone here.
Hey.
Hello.
So this is Fayedra, and as you know, Fayedra is going to be the host of Soul Survivors. And Helah, I met her, I think it was back in June, and I was sharing with her that I was going to be doing the show, and I thought she had a really, really good story. Just some information that we exchanged at that time. But what I want to start with is the emotional pillar, because I think a lot of us really don't understand how important and how our emotions really affect our health. I don't think that people relate the two.
Right.
And I think that we have to really stop and get off the merry-go-round of life and really examine certain things, because we create conditions in our bodies that we don't necessarily have to have because of things that are triggered through our emotions, stress. Then now you got, your cells are active, acting crazy inside your body, and one thing leads to another. And that's the reason why our emotional health is so important. Now, I know people talk a lot about mental health, but I think before you even get to a mental health problem, that you have an emotional health problem.
Right. And that leads to the mental health problem.
Yes.
And then at that point, now it's even harder to have to deal with. Versus dealing with the emotional side. But again, I was sharing during the segment, I think it's because we're not aware, we haven't identified and linked the two together.
Right.
And I don't think anyone has really stopped to take the time to say, emotionally I'm out of control, and emotionally it's predicting what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Because what our emotions are what we think, how we feel, and what we do, which is our behavior. So if our emotions are affecting those things, then not only is it affecting our lives, but it's affecting the people that are around us.
Absolutely.
And especially if we have children, and both of you ladies are mothers.
They feel that energy. They feel
sure
it.
do. They sure do.
And not only that, when you start going through, and I was a single mother for a long time, but I know that when I was going through stuff, she felt it. And I never even had to say anything. And that's how your children are. They pick up that energy.
Right.
That's why we as adults have to get our emotions in check.
Absolutely.
That's why we have to get our emotions in check. Now, I'm not saying, you're going to be happy 24/7. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that our emotions, because the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave directly affects not just us, but other people. Now, the reason why I want you ladies here, because I want you to kind of share how your thinking process was and how it affected what you felt and how you behaved. And the reason why I want you to share it, because, I really do try to gear toward women, because I understand women. I'm a woman myself. So it would make sense that I would be talking to women. So, and we've all been in an emotional relationship, okay, because it wasn't healthy, but it was an emotional relationship. We had that attachment.
Yes.
Just one or several?
Well, that's what we're here to talk about, and I want to be real. I want to be
I'm
transparent.
hard-headed, y'all. I'm trying to learn.
I want to be transparent with this, and the reason why is because this is a real issue.
It is.
And people feel stuck. They don't even know. They haven't even been able to identify that they have this emotional attachment. And they don't understand that that emotional attachment is affecting how they think, how they feel, and what they're doing.
That's right.
They don't even understand that. And that could have a serious effect long term.
Yes.
So can you all share anything that can come to mind that you can just kind of give as an example of what you think that would be beneficial to the audience in reference to being and staying emotionally healthy?
Well, man, to even start it, again, you have to identify that there's a problem. You know what I'm saying? Because no one says to themselves, "I'm not emotionally healthy." That's not.
Nope.
I mean, I was in a toxic and abusive relationship for over 10 years. You don't just say something's wrong with me. That's not what you think. So. You first have to be able to identify it and to say that there's a problem. For me, the problem is obvious as someone putting their hands on you when they don't have a right to, or not coming home, to the next morning, being cheated on. Those are things that are obvious, but those are the things that, crazy enough, I still couldn't see. But what did it for me was my health. Like, it started to affect my health and my daughter's health. My daughter was less than a year old. We were in and out of hospitals, and I couldn't figure out why. Why is it that, because before then I had been pretty much healthy, and I couldn't figure out why are we constantly in the emergency room. Never forget, she had a ride in the back of an ambulance by herself, and she's crying for me, and I'm like, okay, what is going on? Why are we sick and in and out of the hospital? And it's because of the environment I was in. It was an environment that kept me sick. I thought I was okay, mentally and emotionally, but physically, my body was warning me, hey, if you don't do something, if you don't get out of this environment, this is what's going to happen to you. It's not going to lead you or your daughter anywhere in a good place. So,
but the emotional side of that, because of what you were thinking and feeling, and it affected you staying in that environment. Because here you are, you're in this marriage and you have children, and you want to have that family, you want that foundation. Everybody wants, when you have children, you want them have that. You want them to grow up in that environment.
Right.
But when it became unhealthy at that point.
Oh, yeah. But that's the thing. Hindsight, I guess, looking at it, when you're in it, of course, like I said, the obvious things you would think that you understand, this is not healthy, but you're not thinking that way. It took my health becoming and my daughter's health becoming an issue for me to wake up and say, okay, this is not okay, and the way that you're thinking is not okay, and the way that you're feeling is not okay. So before then, again, I didn't equate the two to say, yeah, this is what shouldn't be happening, because again, of course, you always want your family, and you always want that foundation of, what you see or what you think is, a family and things like that. But at the same time, you have to do, when your health and your wellness and your mental wellness, like when all of that is taking effect, you have to reevaluate some things. And to say on the emotional side, my story is a little bit different, where it wasn't just, hey, we have so much invested with each other and hard for you to leave. When I left, things got way worse. So it's not just a thing of, our old people, and my mother was one of those people. You dumb for staying, that type of thing. But, what happens when you leave and then you get stalked, and then your life is more hell than it was being in it, and the fear that you have. So that is more of the emotional that I dealt with, not the tie of, oh, I need him in my life and I got to go back. I was trying to escape some of the time. But it was once I did escape, was the aftermath of that, and I can't have a life without him, so I may as well just go back. That was the emotional time for me. So it's a little bit different with everyone's situation.
Yeah. What about you, Kayla?
Well, for me, dealing with it, the gym is what I chose to do, exercise, to be able to deal with the feelings that I was having, and that anxiety. And I know dealing with those kind of feelings and having those kind of feelings eventually leads to health issues.
Yes.
So in order to prevent those things from happening to me, I decided to put all of that energy into exercise and to doing different things just to try to strengthen my inner man. Listening to different things like Abraham Hicks, and just trying to strengthen my inner man. Yeah.
So what was it that was going on that you had to make that decision to get to the gym?
Well, being in a toxic relationship, trying to really figure out that type of energy that I was dealing with. And once I figured out the energy and learned about the narcissistic person, I I had to do something to be able to, because I'm still in my situation. And until I'm completely out,
Right.
I had to learn what the energy was and how to deal with it to combat that energy.
Right.
And, exercise, that's my biggest stress reliever, and that's what I have to do.
So it wasn't that because you were overweight or anything like that, you just had to have an outlet.
I had to have an outlet, and that was my outlet, and it just opens up so many other doors for me. Exercising, I mean, that's what led to me bodybuilding, and it's opened up a world of doors, even with my my mental health, my mental, and the stability.
Right.
I have now learned that everything that I have gone through and go through, it's just building my emotional character.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, positive things do come out of the situations.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
absolutely. And
once you identify it, man.
Yeah.
Once you identify it, that's when everything.
Yeah, everything changes.
That's when it
changes.
changes.
Yeah.
I mean, this life that I'm living now is completely different than the life I was living. Like, it's peaceful on this side of life. But again, I had to identify because it was a cycle. It had been going on for so long.
Yeah.
So yeah, first step. Is
And then you kind of get, it's like you become immune to it, because it goes on for so long. It's like you become immune to it. It's like, become immune to pain. It's like, oh, well, it's like when you hear people say, oh, I have chronic back pain. Well, they become so immune to it is that they just deal with it. And that's how we get, in situations like that, especially toxic environments, whether it's work and even when it comes to work. Because for me, mine was work. Mine wasn't really, and not to say that I haven't had toxic relationships. But let me say this about the toxic relationships that I was in. It was probably more me than them. And the reason why I say that is because of the way I thought. I didn't think like the average female. I thought like a guy. And it's like, hey, I'm not trying to have no relationship. I ain't about all that. If you want to just hang out, we can do that. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't know. So them getting attached to me was probably more toxic for them than it was for me. So I can't really, relate to that, because once I established quickly that something was toxic, just like, oh, I can't, this is not good for me.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be selfish, but if it's not good for me, then I just can't be. So I can't have my emotions tied to that. So people say to me, well, you sure do cut people off. Well, because if emotionally it's creating a health problem for me, then yes, I have to do that. It's necessary for me.
And for me, and probably most women, sometimes you say, because you feel like that you can change that person.
The benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, you feel like that. Hey, I can change him. I can help, but it doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't
happen.
No, it doesn't. And that's the thing that we have to recognize. We have to identify that. And the thing is that we have to identify that before we get too emotionally involved. See, that's where we have to recognize those things, because people, people pretend, you might get 60, 90 days of them kind of, being nice and kind and all that, but eventually the real them are going to come out.
Always.
Eventually, but what we have to do is we have to put our emotions, we have to put our feelings, our thoughts on hold until we see the whole picture. Because once we see their character, then we know who we're dealing with. But see, what happens is, as women, we get emotionally involved.
Yeah. Well, we're emotional beings.
Dive in head first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Head first.
We do. And that's why we have to take the time to examine now. And then once we dive in head first, then we're there for longer than what we should be.
Or should I say heart first?
Yeah. Definitely not mine. Definitely not mine first.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is. You're right. You're right. It is hard first. We just let go of those feelings. We don't put them on reserve. We don't sit back and say to ourselves, let me examine this person's character.
Right.
And then when you get into something toxic, and instead of recognizing that, and then once you get out, take the time to go through the healing process and ask yourself, what is it about me that's attracting
this kind of energy?
What is it about me? Don't look at what he did.
Yes.
Let's look at me, because there's something about me that made me stay. And I understand what you're saying. But there's something about me
no,
that.
but even still, that I had to ask myself, why did I think I deserved that for
Right.
so long? Like, why did I think that that's all I was worthy of? Why did I think that? I mean, and that's where faith ties in for me and God is because it's like, okay, you're saying that that's all I could give you. This is what you're saying. This is what you're believing me to. This is it. This is what you're saying that you have faith in me in. And it's like, wow, like, no, that's not what I think I'm worth. I believe you more than that.
Right.
I mean, and so that was the part that I had to examine and then the faith leading to not having the fear anymore, because again, I knew that I could trust God, meaning in the beginning when I left, yeah, man, having somebody stalk you and come and follow you, and it was horrific, and this happened numerous times. Someone coming in your home, leaving listening devices. Come on, like anybody would be fearful of this. It's some lifetime stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm telling, like, God was able to give me peace and to, but again, I had to understand I have to have faith in Him, meaning if I'm going to leave, I have to understand He got me. If I'm going to leave, and I'm saying that I'm scared to leave, because every time I leave, God, this is what happens. Okay, well, God is like, well, let's time do this different, and you trust me. And you stop trying to do everything, and you can trust me. So, yeah, there's a process to it that you have to, and I mean, it's all the same, though.
But once you identify that feeling of the fear and the feeling of knowing that you can trust God, at that point, once you identify that, at that point, then you can move forward. Then you can move forward. But if you haven't
no longer controls
exactly.
me. Okay, why do you keep going back? Because it's not that you just think that it's better over there. It's just that you keep getting scared back into that situation.
Right.
Okay, well, if you're only going back because you're scared, then we need to identify that.
Exactly.
Well, then if you're scared, then God like, well, dang, what am I here for? Like, if you scared of this dude, like, what am I? So I had to put all that, and I had to connect the whole dots, and that wasn't, you know. But again, it all came back to me. It had nothing to do with it.
But see, that's a process too, and that is time. It takes time for that, and because see, what we don't understand is that it takes years of that being in that type of relationship, and it wears on you. So now you have this thinking process in that situation. So now once you get out of it, now your whole thinking process you have to readjust that.
Yeah, I mean, like literally. I would start,
you don't just go from saying, I'm free. Well, guess what? You're not delivered because your mind is not free.
Yeah.
You may be free from that situation, the environment, but you're not. But it's a process. The thing is that we gotta take the time to heal.
And for me, one thing I would do is listen to affirmations, self-love, because I had to learn to love myself.
That's what this whole journey is.
Put value on who I am.
Yeah.
That's what this whole journey is.
Yes, because what we do is we let other people determine what our value is, and when we do that, we're losing who we are.
Exactly.
We don't even know.
But the thing is, if you're caught up in that, meaning like, okay, I don't value you enough to come home. Well, that's what I'm stating. That's what you're stating my value is, and that's how I feel like I'm valued because one, you didn't come home. That's evident, and two, because I'm accepting it. I'm still here. So that's the thing of, and believe me, I understand. And yes, that's where it all starts. Being able to say, wait a minute, because again, someone else can set a standard. Like I can say this paper is valued at $10. You may come back and say $20,000. That's your view. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, no, I have to know who I am, who my image is in, and who what my worth is. So then it's like anybody that comes along, like, man, you don't understand. You don't understand who I am.
Right. But that only comes through time of being able to saying to yourself, I'm going to take the time and go through the process.
I tell people it's called an adult timeout. I've been in an adult timeout, truly single, for almost 2 years. So believe me when I tell you it's an adult timeout, meaning I'm not going to go out here seeking attention. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be dating a whole bunch of people. I'm going to figure out why I keep doing the same things I'm doing so I can get down to the bottom of it. So I can truly have what I desire.
Yes.
It's simple, which is also peace, which I have by myself, but long term what I truly desire.
Right. And the thing is that if we don't take the time to renew our minds, because that's what it takes. We have to take the time to renew our minds, because you have all that stinking thinking from somebody else's thought process of you.
And you gotta
You got to get rid of that. And it for even more for your benefit.
Absolutely.
Even more for your benefit. Even if you don't, and that's the whole problem. getting into another relationship with all that luggage?
Yes.
And they women
And
need
then-
to take the time. to
And then,
unpack
but then
their
people say,
luggage.
well, find someone who cares enough about you to unpack it. And you know what my response to that is? I am not a project manager.
I said,
I'm
I'm
not
not build.
project-
I'm not build a dude.
I'm not a project manager.
Listen, this is not build a bear. This
No,
ain't build a dude.
no,
I'm not here
no.
to. That's for
Yes.
God, you and
Yes.
God. And I say that
Yes.
because, man, if I had to put in the work,
We
what
have
else,
to
man? I don't
we
think
we
so.
all have to unload that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be, because even the Bible says that you can't put new wine in old wineskins. You can't take old bricks to a new house. You can't do it.
Not at all.
That's what the
You
word
can't
said.
do it. So
Yeah,
so
man,
so so
yeah.
that means that you need to get rid of.
Mhm.
That's what that means.
Yes.
And you got to renew your mind.
Have to.
Because if you don't renew your mind, you're taking that same thinking pattern into something else.
Insanity. That's
And not only
insane.
Getting the same
And not-
thing, expecting different results.
and-
Yes, ma'am.
And
That
not
is
and not
very
only
much.
and not only that, you're passing that on to your children, because guess what? They
Yes.
watch us.
Mhm.
They
Yes.
observe us.
Mhm.
Yes.
You're not gonna sit here and say to your kids, don't be messy. But hey, if you messy, then you don't have to tell them not to be messy. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to tell them that. They observe us. They watch what we do.
Yes.
They may not always listen to what we say, but they watch what we
They
do.
are watching.
Mhm.
And that's why, as women, we cannot be in toxic relationships, especially with daughters.
Yes.
And let me say this, especially with sons. And I say
Well,
that,
yeah, too.
and I say
Yeah,
that
that
because,
too.
man, I have a 16 and 12. So, and I haven't dealt with the daughter. I left, and I mean, it was nothing but the grace of God. Y'all don't understand that my daughter wasn't exposed to any of that, but she doesn't know that. She doesn't know any of that. But my sons, it's just as important with young ladies as it is men, because now my sons, like the character I want them to be of men, the values and standards and integrity, they have to see that. So if they don't see that, then how are they going to be that? They're not going to be able to hear their mama
Absolutely.
nagging at them.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, they have to.
Exactly.
So that it is just vital as young
Yes,
men
it
as it
certainly
is for
is.
young women.
Absolutely.
Just as vital.
Well, and the reason why I was adamant about young women is because I was a single mother,
Mhm.
and when I was with her father, I had to make a decision. She was 3. It's like, okay, she's getting older now. She's becoming more observant. I cannot have this man acting any kind of way because she's watching.
Mhm.
So, and of course, that's my only child, so I don't have a son, but it is equally as important for boys, because they if your husband is talking to you crazy,
Mhm.
don't your kids gonna do the same thing, because they
and
think
not
it's
only
okay.
to you,
Yeah.
but to their wives.
To their
You know,
wives,
this is
yeah.
setting the standard
Yes.
of what their relationships will
Exactly.
be. So it is very much, and I say that, and my heart is, and I have a daughter, yes, but my heart is for men and young men,
Yes.
and I say that because they are the foundation, and I say this meaning it is so vital that we get this right.
Yeah, it
So
is.
with my son, and I say that women, we self heal and we come around and all this, and I'm not saying that I want my daughter to go through anything. That's not what I'm saying. But them boys, it's like, man, we gotta get this right.
Yeah,
We do.
yeah.
We gotta get
Yep.
this right.
Yep.
And women, we come around and we're maybe a little bit more intelligent. I don't know, but we gotta get it right with the boys, man. We gotta get it right with these young men.
Because they're the foundation.
And it's
They're
like
the
we can't
foundation.
continue to create generation after generation of sorry young men. We can't
Right.
do that
No.
based on sorry men. And that's the part of it all where it's like we as women know we can't be in a toxic relationship, not just because our daughters are watching, but because our sons are watching
Yes.
too.
Yep, they are. That's
And they're
exactly
becoming
right.
exactly what they're seeing.
Yes.
Exactly. That's what they're doing. Now you have a son and a daughter.
Yes.
And how old is your daughter?
My daughter is 15, and I have a 9-year-old son.
Mm.
So
And it's important that what they see that goes on in your house between you and your partner.
that interaction, because things that they may see or things that they may hear,
Yeah.
that stuff is getting embedded in that
Yeah, it is.
subconscious
Yes, it is.
mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it's very important.
Yeah, it is. And that's why we have to be careful what we expose our children to
Yes.
as adult women.
Yes.
Because, I think I shared during the emotional segment how, I was molested,
Mhm.
and, that whole thing and how my whole life just spiraled out of control
Mhm.
because of how I felt about myself, how I valued myself.
Mhm.
And, but I was exposed to that. You know what I'm saying? I didn't ask for it. I didn't go in, look for, I didn't, expose myself or, try to be, because, that wasn't me.
Mhm.
But it was, I was placed in that situation with someone who took advantage of me. But my life was just out of control because of it, but because of the way I thought about myself and the way he devalued me, it made me feel that way about myself. So then what I had to do, and it took years and years and years and years and years and years and years. And even now, you know, the other day I was sitting there thinking about, you know, my mother, because my mother's husband, you know, he's deceased now, and I was thinking about, you know, how my mother's feeling now, you know, because now she's alone, and, you know, I was thinking about how, you know, even at the time, you know, and I didn't tell her, I didn't tell her that this was going on, and there was, because I had when you have when you're 8 years old, 9 years old, you don't think, you know, on the lines of, you know it's wrong because you feel that. You know, nobody have to tell you that it's wrong. You feel that. Right. But all at the same time, I love my mother enough to want her to be happy, and this man made her happy. My father and my mother got divorced when I was young, and my father and my mother had a very physical, abusive relationship. So because my mother went through that, my mindset, my thinking was, you know, this man is giving you all the things that you want. As a child, I felt like, how could I take that away from her? So I didn't tell her. However, when she did find out, you know, I'm an adult woman now, you know, and so trying to reconcile that, you got all these emotions and all this stuff, and we still haven't really sat down face to face and really talked about it, because he passed away since the last time I saw my mother, but the emotional trauma. And not only that, but guess what? It affected how I raised my daughter. And not only that, but it also gave me a mindset that I only had one child. My daughter doesn't have any siblings because of what I thought at the time. And see how your thought process can affect your life?
Yeah.
You see how it affects your life?
Decades later.
My daughter's 33 years old. She has no siblings. None. Because of what I went through. And I couldn't process that. But what we have to do as adults, we have to sit back and yes, that's the inner child, but it has to be healed.
It has to be.
It has to be healed. People say, oh, well, that's it. You know, no, let me help you understand something, sweetie. Until I was healed from that, I could not move on. I could not move on. It wasn't even possible. The emotional trauma, and not only then, it started to affect my health. Because I just kept doing things that was damaging my body.
Right.
That was damaging my body. And then I started getting in environments that wasn't healthy for me. So then what I would do is my outlet wasn't the gym at that time. My outlet was work. And that's how it just spiraled out of control to that whole toxic environment. You know, and again, it's not always relationships. It wasn't for me, you know. So I talk about work because I don't think people really relate, you know, that emotional tie to their work, because you know, you have some people that are really like, you know, they take their work serious, their job, they take their job serious, and they love their job, but they have stuff going on with it that they're so emotionally tied to it that it's affecting their health, and they don't even see it, they don't even understand that it is. See, and that was my problem. My problem was my emotional tie to my work. Because, see, I have a very addictive personality. But, see, I also had to be able to identify that I have a very addictive personality. Because then I started attaching myself to things and people because I have this addictive personality. So, you know, when somebody, you know, comes along and, you know, we kind of a little bit have like, you know, same thinking process, you know, at least in the beginning, you know, then you kind of gravitate toward them. You get emotionally tied to them, you know, a little bit. And then, you know, it just kind of, but then eventually you start to see. But then when it starts to affect your health, that's when you have to say to yourself, okay, you have to identify that. Yes.
And that, like, for me, that when that nervous feeling in my
stomach, and you know it.
And I just.
You know, it's just like going on a job interview or, you know, like first date or somebody you want to meet, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
butterfly?
Yeah, you know, you have those butterflies, you know, in your stomach, and you just feel, you got this anxious feeling, you know what I'm saying? But you know it and you feel it.
Yeah, you feel it.
You feel it. You know, you may not be able to say, well, you know, I don't know what that's all about, but you feel it.
Yeah.
And what we have to do is we have to be able to identify that, because with emotions come a lot of things. You know, you have anger, you know, you have jealousy, you have envy. It's a lot of things come through emotions. And, you know, I was never really like an anger, you know, I didn't have like a lot of anger, but, you know, my emotional downfall was when I drive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very defensive driver. I'm not as bad now. You know, No, she didn't just make that face.
I promise you with the story. We will interview my kids. That's all I got to say. Interview my kids. That's it. I ain't got to have no argument. Interview my kids.
I promise you, I promise you, I'm a lot better.
I
promise you, I'm a lot better though.
Gosh.
I'm a lot
That's
better.
growth. Woo! I'm so glad I don't remember before.
You know, so what I would, and it was an experience for me. It taught me that one thing, taught me to be able to identify other things in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's what would happen. I'm on the road and I'm driving. Somebody pulls in front of me. The first thing out of my mouth is, "You're a moron," you know. Then the next person to come along, then you're an idiot. But see, what doesn't happen is, what I have to do is, after the first moron, I have to tell myself, you're at a 10, you need to be at a 2.
Uh-huh.
Because there's going to be more morons out there.
Right.
So if I don't stop myself, I can't control what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn to control me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but what I would do is I would get all the way to like a 25, and by the time I got to my destination,
25.
She ain't lying.
by the time I got to my destination, whoever I was going to see, it was like,
Just emotionally drained.
it didn't even make any sense, because it was like so much anger, so much bad energy.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm driving and I'm just, you know, getting too emotional about people getting on my nerves when I'm driving. But that one thing in that one area, of my life made me examine other areas.
Mm-hmm.
That one area. So now, when I get to the point where I start to feel it, I can feel it coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we can feel it.
Yeah, you gotta know your triggers. You have to know what gets under. I mean, you have to. The process, honestly, if we were to do things correctly, we wouldn't be doing things backwards and finding things out afterwards. But the process of knowing yourself is knowing yourself in the fullness of you. So it's knowing, you know, your triggers, what sets you off, you know, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you gotta know. And I say that because that's how you keep peace. Like, okay, if stupid people make you upset, then you have to understand that, okay, those people are everywhere. So versus, okay, so don't even get upset about it.
Right.
Like, just, you know, whatever. So, yeah, you gotta know your triggers.
you have to be able to identify that. Because if you don't, then you're just going to keep going through life with the same vicious cycle. And then what happens with that? So if I had continued in the cycle of just always being angry when I drive, then what happens is you don't just turn that off.
No.
You don't just turn it off. So now I'm going to the next thing.
Now
and I still have the anger.
you angry.
Right. Because now the line is on. These people want to stand at the counter. They want to talk. And now I want to say something because I'm already angry about something that had nothing to do with it.
Now you got to lunch and you angry at the waitress. Now
exactly.
Yeah, that's how it happens.
You know, and it just keeps snowballing and snowballing because we don't get a handle on it. Because we don't identify what triggered that.
But identifying is being able to standing in the mirror, looking in the mirror, standing in your truth, which is hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It is hard.
But it's ugly.
But you have to.
But you have to, man.
If you want to get better.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the only way you're gonna get better.
Yeah.
Because if you don't ask that question, those hard questions, you'll never know the truth.
Never.
And then once you have discovered that truth, then you have to go further and to sit down and come up with a plan, a strategy on what do I need to do to go from here to better myself. Because you do have to be able to understand that, okay, this is not good for me. This is not healthy for me. So now I need to do something different. So what is that something different? Because you'll find that, you know, a lot of things in your life will change. You won't, you know, when you start to identify certain things that are emotionally unhealthy for you, you know, whether it's the people you associate with, whether it's your job or relationships of any kind, not just husband and wife or, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, any kind of relationship, because, you know, we have unhealthy friendships.
Yes.
It ain't just relationships. Let me put that out there.
Any relationship.
Yeah, because that is a
It
relationship.
is.
Mhm.
That is a relationship, and we have to even examine those.
Mhm.
Yeah. How do you act when you're around that person? What are they bringing to the
Exactly.
table? Are they growing you? Are they
Are you
maturing you?
exactly?
I
Are
mean,
you
what are
doing
you
the same
getting?
thing to
Or
them?
what are you
Exactly.
getting from it? So yeah, you have to do that.
So
with
so we
everything.
have to examine all the areas, because if it's affecting our emotional health, it's affecting our physical health.
Absolutely.
If it's affecting our emotional health,
Mhm.
guaranteed it's affecting your physical health. And you may not see the effects of it today or tomorrow, you know what I'm saying? But I can guarantee you, the onset, if you just keep doing it over time, because even a drip of water,
Uh-huh.
a consistent drip of water will change the formation of a rock. As hard as that rock is,
Mhm.
if that water is consistent, if you don't believe me, go look at the mountains.
Mhm.
How you think all those crevices is in the
That's
mountain?
right.
Because the water keeps running, it keeps streaming in the same spot.
Mhm.
And eventually it's going to erode. It can't help but that. So it's the same. It's the same principle.
Absolutely.
It's the same principle with our health.
Mhm.
We cannot keep doing this stuff emotionally, and don't think that it's not going to affect our health and our well-being.
Mhm.
And not just that, but everybody who's around us,
Yeah.
especially our children.
Mhm.
And now you're talking about generational now.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think generational curses came from? Where? Because Big Mama.
Mama, them.
Mhm. Mom and them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it came from. Because people, well, I got high blood pressure. Big Mama had blood. No, you eat like Big Mama.
Mhm.
You don't exercise like Big Mama. Let's change some lifestyle habits, and let's see if in fact that would be the case.
Mhm.
But the thing is that we have to be.
Identify it,
we-
though.
I was just getting ready
Yeah,
to
so
say that
that's the
first.
first-
You have to
that's the
identify
step
this
one,
thing as a
man.
generational
That's
curse.
step
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Step one is to identify.
Yes.
You can't, and I say that meaning even with this with the emotional pillar or emotional health, in all of your relationships, you have to identify is there a problem, like just to examine them,
Yes.
you know, to say, okay, is there a problem? You know, people, you know, everybody nowadays, they want to say toxic relationship. Everything's toxic. But you have to understand what that all entails.
Yes.
You have to say to yourself, man, am I functioning properly in this? Whether it's a friendship, a relationship,
Yes.
a marriage,
Mhm.
with your children, like, am I functioning how I'm supposed to function? Well, why am I an angry mom this morning? Why am I this type of employee today or coworker? Or
Mhm,
why is it that I feel this way when he comes around, or if
Right.
he says this, or you have to be able to identify those
Yes.
things with everything.
Everything.
So the emotional part of it is because you wake up and you're not feeling some type of way. Let's just say you're not feeling your best, or you feel sick in your body, or you didn't get rushed your back, whatever. That emotion now is turned into your mental to say,
Yes.
I'm not gonna have a good day.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm angry today. I'm
Yep.
mad today.
Yep.
I'm not in a good mood today.
Yep.
I'm off limits today. Don't go there with me today.
Yep.
Like, you've already convinced yourself.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you have to be able to first step identify, man,
Yeah.
Mhm.
to change anything. And a lot of the times we don't even see that there's a problem, again, to be able to identify. Like, we don't understand because of the vicious cycle of life.
Yes.
Mhm.
And we don't take the time, you know, we really don't, and
Mhm.
especially as women, because we're moms, you know, we go to work, we gotta cook dinner, we gotta spend time with the kids, it's homework, especially as a single mom, it's tough, you know, because then you gotta try to fit that time in. You gotta say, I gotta have some time for myself. But the next thing you know, you think you're gonna have that time and you done fell asleep. You know what I'm saying? It's like now you're asleep. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do my nails. It's like, you know,
Tired.
you're tired because you have so much going on. So when do you have the time to really sit down and examine your emotional health? But see, what we have to do is we have to take the time.
Oh, definitely.
We have to
Prioritize.
take the
Mhm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
We have to take the time.
Again, when you want better for yourself, then you do better. You go make the time
Yeah,
to make it happen.
that's right.
That's it.
That's right.
Don't
Because
matter.
because if you don't, you're gonna stay on this in the same vicious cycle.
Yeah.
It's not gonna end. It's not gonna end by chance. It has to end by change.
Absolutely. And the change starts with us.
It starts here
Yes.
with me, with you. With,
Yes.
You know, that's where it starts.
Yes.
Because we can't keep sitting back here looking what other people are doing, because we
Mhm.
can't control what other people do. We have to examine ourselves and say why.
Mhm.
And that's a hard question to ask yourself. I remember when I went through when I and my ex-husband, well, he's deceased now, her dad, divorced, during that time span, and we had a great relationship even after we divorced, and it had nothing to do with being bad. We had a really good relationship. He was my dear friend. I loved him. Even now I still love him. But but we had an emotional bond, and not only did we have it, but he had it with her. But the relationship was a good relationship to the point where I could sit back here and say to myself, there's nothing toxic with us, between us, which allowed me the opportunity to expose my daughter to him, but because I didn't see, because, and we know we wasn't together for a long time, but at that time it was different. I was in a different place in my life, but when I met him, and we finally all got together with Fayedra, she was instantly, and I think it was more of a spirit thing, because that's how I connected with him. It wasn't a physical thing, it was more of a spirit thing. But because I saw his character, his true character, that's why we didn't have, any friction emotionally between us. But the emotional bond that we had was a good bond. It was a good bond. Now, he had a lot of stuff that was going on with him that I thought that I could change. I thought that I could love him enough.
Most women.
Well, but the thing is that his issue wasn't, he was a good guy to us. He was really good to us. It was he had some family issues going on because he was adopted at 2. And
childhood issues that he just never dealt with. And it all starts with loving yourself. And I say that because and for me, and I say this meaning if my mama never told me, if my kids never told me, of course it feels good to hear it, but you have to know, your image through God. You have to, it has to be as solid as this. It has to be solid. I know who I am, whether you think, anybody say I know who I am. And he didn't have that.
No,
and he didn't have that because it wasn't his environment. He wasn't exposed to it.
Nope.
He didn't have the foundation of God as a young child, but he had childhood trauma that it was very unfortunate. That he's someone so, he was my angel, someone so with such a big heart. But again, that's why you have to, I don't have any childhood trauma, thank God. I just started, in an adult trauma. But, I say, dealing with those issues, if you have them in to identify them and deal with them. And I say that because the way he left this earth, that's not how, you shouldn't leave begging family to come see you in the hospital. You shouldn't leave wanting and desiring for people to love you and to care. And that means you don't care about yourself.
Exactly.
So it's like,
it was heartbreaking.
So you got to deal with those issues.
And the thing is that here he was a child, 2 years old, and put in foster care, and just the trauma of that. He didn't even know. Again, he didn't know how to deal with this. So he became an adult man with all this stuff. And when I seen him, he was an angel. I'm telling you, it's like he was an angel.
Sounds like he poured into everybody what he wanted.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we gave that to him, but it just wasn't enough because he couldn't identify with who he was. And as much as we loved him, we loved him.
And he knew it.
Oh yeah, he knew. He knew, but it just wasn't. It wasn't enough because of what he desired. And so, but it's unfortunate because he died there.
That's
that emotional.
That's how important it is.
It's so. It is so important. To see someone on their deathbed, to see this, begging. It was horrible. It was horrible. And we were there, but we weren't enough. And he knew we were there. But all at the same time, that's what he wanted. He wanted his mother. And he never learned how to deal with that. He wasn't healed. He was never healed from a childhood. Trauma. He tried to deal with it as a man, didn't know how.
Didn't know how to deal with it.
Didn't know how to deal with it. You know why? No examples. No examples.
But I'm going to tell you what the Bible says. God will be a father to the fatherless.
Yes, he will. Yes,
He
he
will,
will.
Father. That's
Yes, he
why you
will.
gotta have that. And I'm not saying you'll have the perfect one. I'm not saying that you'll know how. Believe me, I didn't know how to become the woman that I am either. And meaning to because my mother didn't go through what I went through. And not only that, but she has a completely different mindset. She wasn't no, baby, come here, let's fix it. No, that was she. By this point, she was done with me. Okay, I was stupid and everything else in the book. So there was no that. So to be
that's only because I'm just a no nonsense type of person. Because when stuff starts to affect me, I just can't deal with it. That's just me.
Right
you know what I'm saying? That was just me, and it wasn't because of that. It was just that
But again, to be able to, you gotta have that. Everything comes back to God for me.
Yes.
And I say that meaning the whole journey of everything. If you're trying to figure this thing out and figure out the right path, meaning you gotta know what He says about you.
Yes.
You gotta know how you were created in His image. You gotta know. Because that's where your worth comes from.
Yep.
That's how you're going to know how worthy you are, what your value is.
And once you realize that, that's when the game totally changes.
It does.
That's when the game changes.
Yep.
I mean, it's a wrap.
It does.
It's over.
Yep.
It's over.
Yep.
It's over.
But unfortunately for him, he didn't get that chance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
and that's why I don't want. Don't be him. Don't.
That's why until I'm out of my situation. That's why I constantly strengthen my inner man. And the negative things brings about positive things if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Like I've seen so many positive things come out of my life right now, just this year, with knowing who I am, really finding my value and my self-worth, and seeing that God is like, He totally has my back 100%. He has showed who He is to me this year alone.
Yeah.
Like I have made plans, but it wasn't my plan, it's His plans. Things that I said I was gonna do.
Yes.
He did something totally different.
Yes.
Just he's been blowing my mind all year. So
That's where it starts, man.
And so once we get an understanding of that, just like this last show that I did this past week was about knowing who we are in the spirit, because we are spirit, and if we see ourselves as being spirits, because God knew us before He formed us, that means that we had to be a spirit. Yes. So if we connect with God in the spirit, we will truly hear Him. We will truly hear Him. But we have to get out of, because we don't know our worth. That's because we don't realize that we are spirit beings having a human experience. That's what we are. So what's going on in this realm, it really shouldn't affect us, because we are a totally different type of being. True. And so that right there should give us some self-worth for knowing who we are. It's like, man, look, God created me in His image.
I feel like a superhero.
Boo, you need to get away from me, honey. You know what? You know what?
This is why I told, man, 2019 was my motto. God don't want that for me. I'm sorry. God don't want that from me. You don't understand what my daddy say about me.
Okay.
Yes. You don't want that from me. And he told me no.
Yes.
That's what he said.
And guess what? And when we understand that, but that's why we have to get out of our emotions and get to know who we really are in Him. Because when we understand that worth.
But emotions, people don't even, man, you got to get, emotions are just chemicals. That's all it is. Like, we give it so much meaning, like, oh, I'm emotionally tied and this. Like, we give it so much more. Like, it's literally, I may feel, it's a chemical, I may feel hot right now. Yeah. And then the next 20 minutes I go outside without a jacket on, I may feel cool. It's just that quick that can change. That's all it is a chemical. So for you to understand that, first of all, if you think I'm going to say that I allow chemical to control me and the way that I think and the way that I'm acting, like, you got to be out your mind.
I'm telling you.
Like, it's something as simple as a chemical. You're going to control my mood throughout the day?
Yes.
That's all emotions are, chemicals. So no, I'm not going to allow that to. But again, it gets in deeper when you're talking about your environment, because if that's all your spirit person or your mental state, whatever, your energy, your vibe, if that's all is being fed. Yes. Day in and day out is mess and toxic.
That's all it's going to know.
That's all you're going to know. So to be able to say and not allow it to control you at that point is hard. But once you're outside of it, you're like, oh no, never again.
Right. And because once you identified and you started, you're in the healing process. I'm not saying you're on the other side. I'm saying you're in the healing process. At that point, you have a guard up. You're not going to let all that other stuff. No. You know what I'm saying? You this is how it's gonna be. It's like a shield. It's gonna boom. It's like, remember that? What was that game? Was that Pac-Man? Or no, not Pac-Man. The other game where
it's bouncing off the wall.
Yeah, and you just take that little, just going back and forth. That's you know, because but again, we have to be able to identify what our triggers are. You know, whether it's sadness, and that's the other thing is that when we let that kind of stuff go on too long, that's where depression creeps in. Mm-hmm. That's why so many cases of depression.
Yes.
That's why it's so many cases of depression on the scene. And now you have all this depression, then you have people on medication, then you got to deal with the side effects in the next 10 years. You know what I'm saying? It's a vicious cycle.
They're not even dealing with the issue.
Exactly.
They're not even dealing with not even really dealing with the problem.
You're putting a Band-Aid on it.
Not knowing you going home to the issue.
It's like you're accepting it.
Yeah.
I accept that I'm depressed, and so I'm gonna take the medication to.
Well, the doctor said that I need this so that I can get better. But that's
not identifying. Well, listen. Why are you feeling this way? What is making you feel like you're depressed? What is it? Is that what's going on? That you know what I'm saying? Like, where is this coming from? And but most people will say, "Oh, well, I don't know. I just feel this." Or no, I mean,
there's a root issue to everything.
You know why? And this is the reason why I honestly believe this is because when you start to feel something emotionally, there's something that chemical is released in your body. So it's not just it's a physical thing.
Yeah,
it becomes a physical thing.
Can I give you the example Miles Monroe said? But it's a good one. He said, like when you see that man with all them muscles and everything else, he said, them chemicals that's released in you, he said, you feel good from the moment. I'm like, yes! That's what I equate to that. Yes, it's chemicals that are released that you feel in that moment, that your eyes get bigger. It's like, oh my God, I like what I see. I'm enjoying what I see.
Yes.
So yes, it's a chemical that's released in your body. Most definitely.
Yeah.
I just like that example.
Yeah. but that pertains to anything. I mean, that's
anger, sadness,
especially sadness, because you feel it's just like when you're happy, you start to feel it's like she has this dance. She started to feel happy. She started dancing. You know what I'm saying? So, but you feel when you starting to get happy, it's something that chemical is released in your body, and you start to feel it. When you start to get angry, that chemical is released in your body. You start to feel it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know. So I don't care what nobody on the planet say. We all have the same exact reaction when it comes to that. Now I know we're all different, but guess what? God designed us all the same, and everybody has the same reaction.
Yeah, how we respond to it may be different, but it's the reaction
is the same.
Yes.
So what we have to do is learn how to respond versus reacting.
Yes.
See that's where we make our mistake, because once we react.
So that's being a creator and not a reactor, because we create our reality.
Yes. You know why? Because we react.
Yeah.
Versus responding. So when especially when we're emotional, so whether it's anger, sadness, it doesn't matter. Especially when we're emotional, that's why we have to be able to identify, and that's why people get depressed, because they don't identify that before it goes too far.
Right.
They don't identify it because you feel something inside of you. So when you start to feel that, hey, I'm at a 10, I need to be at a 2. You got to be able to stop yourself, because it's going to keep snowballing. And then sooner or later, it's going to be so big, you can't even control it.
You know, one of my sons asked me, like, how do you wake up, and not just to say me, even though I typically do wake up in a really good mood, but the question was, how does someone wake up in a good mood in the mornings and to be able to dictate their day? And my simple response, and I know it wasn't me, it was the Spirit speaking. I wish I was this wise. But waking up with a spirit of gratitude, and I say that meaning if you're suffering from depression, if you're suffering from, being sad or anxious and things like that, the Bible speaks on that, and I've shared that. But if you're suffering with that, wake up with you have to have something to be grateful. Man, I'll be breaking down, Lord, thank you that I can see this morning. Lord, thank you that I was able to brush my own teeth this morning. I was able to put on my clothes. Man, I get down to the wire, and meaning you have to be able to find something to be able to say, I just thank you. Yes. You can't, if you have that mindset of being able to be thankful, grateful, and have, it can, I'm not saying it will eliminate depression, but I'm saying, how do you get into a better mindset? How do you get into a better mental place? Man, waking up and just simply saying, I thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, and whether it's, man, thank you for protecting me throughout the night while I was asleep. You know, I'm not saying that I ain't got the Mercedes. I ain't thanking them for that yet. I ain't thanking them for I'm not, so you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you got to get out of what everybody else be like, oh, thank God for the house. He ain't blessed me with the house yet, but I thank you for being able to have breath.
Okay, and a roof over my head.
You know what I'm saying? I thank you for being able to protect my kids.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they're all healthy. Thank you, Lord, for health. Thank you, Lord, for wellness. Thank you, you know what I'm saying? So you have to be able to find things. So if you're suffering from that, that's just a tip that I can give. My son asked me that question. He's 12. He asked me that, like, how do you be able to sit in my man just wake up being grateful? Yeah. Gratitude, man. If you're doing that, then you will set the tone to have a better day.
Absolutely. And it's having the attitude of gratitude, because that helps you to see life through a whole different set of eyes.
So if you're suffering emotionally, man, just start off with that. Just start off being able to say, man, just wake up in the morning, and I say this because, you know, it's easy for people to say they have a relationship with God. Oh, it starts with God. You know what I'm saying? Like, versus understanding, okay, well, what does that mean? I didn't know the Bible the way that I do now last year this time. So, and I didn't know God the way that I do. But it all starts in relationships. So let's just say you're suffering emotionally, having a relationship. Well, how do you have a relationship? You get to know somebody. Well, how do you do that? You communicate. You wake up and just say, man, thank you. And this and that and this. And you converse with him. Then, you know what I'm saying? So then you're able to say, man, I started my day off like this, and I'm gonna take control of this emotion this morning, and to be able to set the tone of how I want it to be. So, you
know, I went to the doctor on Friday to have some lab work done, and my doctor had been gone for a while. I also have a vitamin D deficiency, and so they just want to kind of keep an eye on it. But when I went back to the doctor, my regular doctor was there, and you know, with her being gone for so long, and I thought that you know, because she is overweight, that, you know, maybe it was something due to her, you know, her health, but it was something due to her health, but it wasn't her weight. And so when I was sitting down and we were talking, and, you know, I was asking how was she doing, and she said she had an aneurysm. Oh, wow. Now, I had never met anyone that actually lived through an aneurysm. Because those things can actually, they can kill you instantly. So I never actually physically met anyone that had an aneurysm. So, you know, at her as a doctor, I'm just curious about what causes that. You know, what causes you to have an aneurysm, you know, and who can have them, you know. And she said she was in intensive care for months. And, you know, and she still doesn't have an understanding of, you know, what causes them, how, what triggers it, or anything like that. So when I walked out of that office, I mean, it was like, I mean, you could actually just have an aneurysm. You know what I'm saying? If that doesn't give you a different perspective on life. But she lived through it. 90% of people don't live through aneurysms. And she lived through it. And I'm sitting here in amazement. I'm like, wow. Seriously. But it made me more thankful. It made me more thankful about my life, and it made me more thankful to want to take care of myself. Now, I don't know what causes aneurysms, but I'm definitely going to do some research on it, only because I want to know, is there something you can do to trigger it? Because if it is, I don't want to do it.
Right.
Okay. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know. But because I met someone who had one and she lived through it, it's like, she says, well, they said it could be hereditary. She said, but nobody in my family's ever had one. You know, and because I guess they don't know in reference to the brain, but I'm really curious about it. But I'm telling you, when you hear something like that, it definitely, the next morning when I woke up, man, my attitude was different. I was like, Lord, thank you. Because I could have had an aneurysm in my sleep. I had a cousin that died in his sleep. You know, Tony was only like 50 something.
And a lady from the gym just passed last Friday. In her sleep from an aneurysm. So,
see, see,
and she went to the gym. She would go work out.
Hey, listen, we're about out of time here this week, but we're going to come back again because we want to really get into the environmental pillar. We did talk about the emotional, but we want to connect the two because we want to see how our emotional health, our emotional pillar keeps us tied in the environmental pillar longer than we should be there. Because I stayed on the job longer than I should have in an environment that almost killed me. So I have firsthand experience about being emotionally tied to something that kept me in an environment too long. And I'm just so thankful that God spared me long enough to be able to identify it and to be able to fix it. And now I'm here. So we're going to come back next week and we're going to talk about the environmental pillar. So this is Greta Ross, your host, Mind, Body, Soul Shift. We have Fayedra. And we have Helah. So we're going to come back and we're going to get a little bit more deeper here because we want these ladies to share more things about their environment and some things that they have had to say that their environment wasn't good for their health. Greta Ross, Mind, Body, Soul Shift. We'll see you next week.
Great.